Hello everybody, I am the Spearman, the embracer of human good and analyst of fiction, and at the time of this video's recording, I have just come back from MenDark Phoenix about a day before this video's release, and I've pretty much been taking it easy since I came home because I had a big dinner because I really like this movie. I know this movie's been getting a lot of hate already, a lot of shit thrown at it, and from a cynical angle, I can understand why, but for the most part, I thought this movie was pretty solid. I know the Bizarro critic himself has told me he is not going to see this movie anytime soon because of all these production problems and stuff this movie has had, and yeah, it sounds really fucked up, just the basic facts of it and how the actors have been responding to the whole ordeal is just fucking insane, and it's really concerning, especially since, given the current circumstances, this is their last film together as these characters, which is a real damn shame. But like I said a minute ago, this is early in the evening when I'm making this recording, and I have decided to release it in the morning, at this time in the morning, because I just felt it was more appropriate to do it the following morning as opposed to very late at night when everybody's sleeping and doesn't want to really check out these vlogs being posted this late or even so early in the morning. Like, what the hell? But that's just how I felt like doing it this time. Again, I like this movie. I really like it. Actually, I think I like it a lot more than Godzilla. The new Godzilla movie, that is. Because, like I said last week, that movie was just so disappointing on a bunch of levels. Like, even worse than BVS, the Batman vs. Superman, I would dare say. This movie, I was afraid it was going to be as bad as people were saying, but, here's the thing about me, about the good old Spearman here. I am an optimist. I am one of the most bizarre, unconventional optimists you will ever know. No matter what you say about a movie, or cartoon, or TV show, or whatever, most of the time, I will admit, even sometimes I get a little scared by something that looks really, really peculiar, really unnerving, or whatever, and I may instantly judge it, but honestly, in comparison, it's not that common that I do something like that. So, when it came to this, this was just one of many, many times when I thought to myself, hey, this could turn out really good. Clearly, people are already hating it, and there's been a lot of bad production history behind the scenes, but who knows, the final product may actually turn out really good. Before we get started, I should give a brief history about my experience with the X-Men movies. I never really saw them as a kid. When I was a kid, it was always about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, or the Ang Lee Hulk film, or even the Fantastic Four films that everybody hates so much years later. Oh my god, it's a couple of the worst films ever. I've had to deal with the Spider-Boy movies. Next. I never really got around to watching any of the X-Men movies. I think, God, even as I got older and older, and we got to First Class and The Wolverine, and then Days of Future Past, I would say that Days of Future Past is when I started to get more interested, like, oh, they're going this far, this many years after the original X-Men movie was released. This might turn out to be really interesting. And I think I came across the Rogue Cut. I watched the X-Men Rogue Cut of Days of Future Past, and I loved it. I really, really liked it. And so I became intrigued by any future X-Men films, and then Deadpool came out, and I really liked the Deadpool movie, and then Logan came out, and I ended up loving Logan like the rest of the world. Didn't think too highly of it at the time, to be honest, but over the past couple years, it's really grown on me, and I love it like everybody else does. the whole thing with Disney and Fox is just really concerning to me. I mean, like, apparently they bought a division of Fox called 21st Century Fox back in December of 2017 to, like, own the rights to X-Men and stuff, and then they apparently bought the whole 20th Century Fox company itself just recently, this spring of 2019 in March or whatnot. I mean, like, didn't they already have what they wanted for the MCU when they bought the rights of the X-Men Fantastic Four characters and so forth because of their 2017 purchase? I don't know. I don't know all those details, and ultimately it all comes down to this movie and apparently New Mutants of 2020 being the last of the X-Men movies. And everybody's saying that this is... They're not even saying that New Mutants is going to be the last of these movies. They're saying that this is the last X-Men movie, which it clearly isn't. I mean, I'm seeing all these reviews and headliners showing up of the last X-Men movie is as disappointing as it sounds. The last X-Men movie is as bad as it sounds, or it's not the worst finale. It's not the worst way to end the X-Men movies. But this was never meant to be the final X-Men movie, okay? And you can clearly see that just by watching this movie. You clearly can tell they had all these open-ended questions, loopholes, whatever, that they intended to reveal more of in future movies, which apparently now they're not going to because Disney is officially canceling the X-Men movies, these X-Men movies, so that they can... Because they practically own everything with Marvel now, except for Paramount, whatever's working out with Hulk and whatever else Paramount owns. They practically own all of Marvel now, and they only want the Marvel Cinematic Universe to be the only Marvel film universe to exist. With the exception of Deadpool, which may or may not have also had its sequels canceled, which is also fucking bullshit. I don't know all the details about that yet. BC might know more. Bizarre Critic might know more. Okay, no more distractions. Let's get down to X-Men Dark Phoenix, and let's see if it's as bad as everybody has been saying it is for the past couple days alone. Let's go. So the movie begins with some narration by Jean Grey, one of the most famous X-Men characters in X-Men comics and X-Men history itself, apart from Wolverine and Professor X, Magneto, and so forth. And by the way, I do pronounce his name as Magneto, not Magneto, because honestly, Magneto sounds really lame. I don't understand why anybody thought that was a cool name to begin with. It just sounds really bizarre. Magneto. Magneto is cooler, I'm just saying. That's me. Like, we hear this narration of Jean Grey about evolution, about what she wants to become and so forth, and then we see the tragic parents' death car crash and all that never seems to get old. I mean, this is kind of like how like Shazam opened up with except with not with death, but just with the father and the brother being injured and all. But this one, there's a twist. Jean Grey freaks out, like her powers get unleashed when she freaks out over radio music, and it accidentally puts her mother to sleep, who then runs into a truck, and then the car flips over, and the mother is instantly killed, but the father barely survives. You can see he's just there struggling to breathe, to move, whatever. And Jean, of course, is alive, but immediately severely traumatized, and she's being held in some private library room somewhere where she meets Professor X, Charles Xavier. And this is in 1975 when this takes place, and Jean is only 8 years old at this point, which is very different from what we've seen in the old movies. I mean, I know in Last Stand, which showed that Jean was discovered by Charles and Eric Leshner, if I'm saying that right. Eric, who would become Magneto. In that timeline, she was discovered by them when she was a teenager, I think. But of course, because of what happens in Days of Future Past, everything gets rewritten, including the infamous X-Men The Last Stand, which so many people have, like, beaten shitless for years now. It's really tragic. And from what I've seen, I have not seen the film all the way through, but it looks pretty good to me. Including the stuff of the Phoenix, I'm just saying. But hey, like, I might as well tell you guys about right now. If you're expecting a more faithful adaptation of the famous Dark Phoenix saga from the early mid-'80s, this does not adapt it properly. I mean, before I saw this movie, I did not remember much of the details regarding the original saga, but based on what I was seeing here, I could tell right away, this is not an adaptation. These people fucking lied to us again. You know, just typical of studios. Like, we shouldn't even be surprised anymore. Studios will say one thing, and then they'll ultimately go a completely different direction than they said they would, probably for the fun of it. Like, haha, we tricked you. We don't care about what you all want, or half of what you all want. We're just going to do this instead, because it's cheaper, and we like cheap, okay? Cheap is good. Cheap is more profitable, or some shit like that. I don't know. Okay, so back to the story. Jean is discovered by Charles. He brings her to the X-Mansion, where he's just recently started the private academy for young mutants because of what happened in Days of Future Past, which just happened a couple years beforehand. And Jean is hesitant, like, so you think you can fix me? I'm tired of hearing all these people saying they can fix me. And Charles says, I'm not going to fix you. You are not broken, Jean. And then we see the titles and so forth, and then we cut to the present day, or what's the present day of this timeline of this movie, which is 1992. Which is funny because in the past X-Men movies starring James McAvoy as Charles, it always seemed to skip ahead 11 years at least. Like, First Class, it took place in 62. Days of Future Past took place in 73, and that crossed over with the modern X-Men, of all things. Even before Days of Future Past, the timeline, the continuity was all over the fucking place. I mean, and it's probably gonna be a total mindfuck when I eventually watch all these movies and do vlogs with the Bizarro Critic in the near future. Looking forward to that. Gonna be a bit of a surprise for him. And then we had X-Men Apocalypse, which took place in 84. Like, it was 11-year periods, even though Days of Future Past and Apocalypse kept pretending like it was at only 10 years, which I thought was bizarre. They clearly missed a year in that time period. And here, it's only 8 years. Like, it's not 1995, which would have been 11 years after Apocalypse. No, it's just 92, which is, like, barely months after the Cold War finally ended. And they didn't even once mention the Soviet Union, how there's only one superpower, the United States, in the world now, and whatnot. But whatever, the X-Men, in the opening minutes of the movie, the X-Men go on a space mission to save a bunch of astronauts who are investigating a large solar flare, and they barely manage to save all the astronauts. Nightcrawler, Quicksilver, and Jean Grey, I think, they all save a bunch of astronauts, but then they all realize they missed somebody, the boss himself. he was in the lower parts of our rocket. He's still down there trying to fix things. And Jean, and Charles is like helping the X-Men from Cerebo, which is the giant mind machine that magnifies Charles' powers to go across the entire world. He's an advanced and elite telepath who even when he doesn't use Cerebo, his powers can connect with numerous individuals within miles of him. And, he's communicating with the X-Men through Cerebo, and Mystique, aka Raven, played by Jennifer Lawrence, she's begging Jean not to put herself in more danger, but Jean goes ahead anyway, and while she's holding the rockets together and helping the astronaut leader get to safety, the solar flare suddenly is drawn to her, and she absorbs it. It bonds with her, and then I think Nightcrawler, aka Kurt, he goes to save her, and he brings her back, and she's barely alive. Like, is everyone okay? Yes, says Scott, aka Cyclops, and she's like, then let's go home. So everybody returns home, and the X-Men are celebrated, and the president gives them honors and stuff, and all is good, all is well that ends well, and all the children of the X Academy are like, yay, the X-Men, yay, and Raven's a bit pissed off, Mystique's a bit pissed off, telling Charles, how is this supposed to be better than than what things were before? We're just celebrities now. We're just glorified mutants now, and we get these awards and we wave to people and be all superficial and shit and get honored by the president. And Charles, he tries to be light about it. He tries to be aloof about it, if I'm saying that right. And but he quickly gets dramatic, telling Raven, you should know better than anyone. We are always on the brink of just one incident away from them branding us as enemies again, branding all mutants as enemies again. And what's so wrong with that? We shouldn't even be coexisting with them like this to begin with, because Raven's a bit of a bitch and all, and only cares about mutants. Guess she's kind of a mutant supremacist considering the past few movies. But don't worry, Jennifer Lawrence, you won't be around for much longer to endure the mental and physical scars that is this character, as I've heard from you in the past. So things seem to be all right, and Jean. But while the X-Men are partying with some other mutants in the forest, Jean suddenly blacks out when she feels something surging inside her, and she passes out after making a bunch of other young mutants pass out nearby. And before this, I skipped over this accidentally. Before this, there's a family dining, having a private party nearby, and the family dog senses a bunch of alien creatures nearby, and one of them kills this blonde woman played by Jessica Chastain, kills her, and then takes her form. And then the rest of the aliens do the same to the entire rest of the family, taking their form so they can blend in with the Earthlings. And apparently these are the DRB aliens from the DRB Empire, which are actual shape-shifting aliens from the comics, to my understanding. Except for the main antagonist here, played by... who is not the woman... who is not the original blonde woman played by Jessica Chastain. I don't remember if we got her name, whether it was Wendy or something, but the alien leader played by Jessica Chastain in this blonde human form is named Vux, if I'm remembering that right. Vux, if that's even how it's pronounced, and who's not a character from the comics. She is totally exclusive to this movie, to this franchise, and you know, a lot of people are gonna love it when studios just decide to create these made-up characters that never ever appeared in the comics over the decades to fit with their own special needs for these movies. But anyway, Jean is passed out, and Charles is trying to read her mind through Cerebro because of how powerful Jean's mind is. He can't read it as easily, especially as she's grown older. She's like, I think she's only 25 at this point, I guess, considering how she was 8 in the beginning and 75, and this is in 92. So Jean realizes that Charles is picking around in her head, and she fiercely resists, yelling, "Get out of my head!" forcing Charles out of her head because she's become paranoid of him, and she realizes, I guess she forgot. Apparently she forgot that she killed her parents, which I don't think they made that clear earlier in the movie, and this infuriates Raven, this infuriates Mystique, because Charles was picking around in her brain, Jean sort of picked around in his brain briefly, and she realizes that her father is still alive, which, yeah, was clearly implied to us in the beginning, even though Charles claimed that both her parents were dead. And so, Jean prepares to leave the X-Mansion, telling Scott, "My father's alive." "No, he died in the accident." "No, but I just found out he's alive. I gotta find him. I know where he is." "Then I'll come with you, or I'll help you if you stay here." "I know you will." And Jean just, like, goes instant sleep on him. And she goes out, and the X-Men kind of hunt her down. They get in their special X-Men jet, and they go after her, like... And Charles realizes where she's going, which confuses and angers Raven even more. But anyway, they go after her. Jean finds her father in a quiet town, supposedly dozens of miles away, or maybe further away. I don't know how far away this town is, this house is, whatever. She comes up, knocks on the door. He's like, "Hello, can I help you?" And she's just like, "Dad?" And he reluctantly lets her in. And, you know, I really like the tension in this scene where, like, they barely say anything to each other, but they both seem very apologetic towards each other, especially after what happened those many years ago. But Jean sees all these pictures of her father and her mother together, but she is nowhere to be found. And she suddenly gets angry, and the Phoenix is riling up within her. Which, by the way, there was literally only one time that they called it. I don't think they even were talking about her when it came to the Phoenix or the Dark Phoenix, whatever. Back in the 4 scene where we saw, not Emma Frost, I thought it was Emma Frost or whoever. What was her name? The Dazzler? The Dazzler was making all these lights, and she was singing and stuff, and they saw this, there was this fire, there's this huge bonfire or whatever. I think Scott referred to the bonfire, the special qualities of the bonfire, as the Phoenix, or they were referring to her power, her new powers as the Phoenix, or something like that. That is, bizarrely enough, that is the only time that they refer to her or it or something as the Phoenix. It is never called that or alluded to that again, which is bizarre to say the least. I'm getting sick and tired of these superhero movies, like, avoiding having to say these iconic superhero names, supervillain names, or comic book terms, or whatever. I mean, it's just getting really annoying at this point. Maybe it made sense here and there over the past years, but now it's just like, you don't even care. You don't even want to try to remind people that this movie is relating to, is adapting the famous Dark Phoenix saga of the 80s. Anyway, so Jean is getting all riled up, like, why didn't you keep any pictures of me? Why didn't you come looking for me? Why didn't you try to help me? And then the father just gets angry himself briefly, saying, my whole world was taken away when your mother was taken away. And I took you out of it. I cut you out of it. You want to get in here, then come in. Come on all the way. So Jean does, in a sense. She sees this memory of her father and Charles talking, where her father's all shook up, and he clearly doesn't want to have anything to do with her anymore. Wants her to be out of his life and whatever. And then the X-Men arrive, and they say they want to help her, but she's all scared and angry at them and paranoid of them, and they have this fight, which is, and by fight I of course mean that as much as something as a $200 million film can go. Which, by the way, this movie is not even close to getting its budget back yet. After these couple days alone, it hasn't even gotten $20 million at the box office, and I'm like, oh shit, they're in trouble. Because, like, people don't really care anymore. I guess they're just sick of, people in general are just sick of these X-Men movies, because they never turn out special, with the exception of Logan and a couple others, I guess. Raven tries to get closer to Jean, and Jean just pushes Raven away, warning her to stay away, but she pushes her away, and then Raven accidentally gets fucking impaled by a bunch of wood spikes nearby, and Jean freaks out. She observes the wounds briefly, but then she just flies away, because maybe Jean could always fly, I don't know, or just hover, levitate, whatever. Then Hank McCoy, aka Beast, comes over, and of course, like, less than a minute later, Raven dies, saying, I love you. So, yeah, they killed Raven. They killed Mystique off, which makes sense, since there was literally no mention or allusion of her in the ending of Days of Future Past, let alone what happened to her after X-Men The Last Stand, because after X-Men The Last Stand, it was always Jennifer Lawrence we saw as Mystique. We never saw the other woman, I don't remember what the actress's name was. Really a great stunt person, apparently. After X-Men The Last Stand, that was the last time we ever saw of that actress playing that character, and we never, I don't think we ever saw or heard whatever happened to her. They mentioned her a couple times in Days of Future Past, but they never said exactly where she was or what she was doing or whether she ever got her powers back after what happened in The Last Stand. But here, they just killed her off, and I'm convinced. I've heard so much these past few years that Jennifer Lawrence, like, hates the technicalities of being this character, hates all the makeup challenges, all the hours of makeup and this other stuff she has to go through. Like, it's very tediously painful on her, physically and mentally. And I don't know if she has other complaints about the character herself that she has issues with. I'm convinced that after all of these years of complaining and stuff, I'm convinced that Jennifer Lawrence took a stand and say, you better kill me off in this movie, and you better kill me off in a good way, so I never have to play this character again. And you know what? They did. They really did. It was tragic and well-paced, and which, by the way, this movie's not even 2 hours long, and it doesn't even have a post-credits scene, big shock. It was only about an hour 45 minutes. I mean, but one of the biggest strengths about this movie, at least in regards to the first 2 acts, was the pacing. I mean, like, I was really impressed with how the pacing was. Like, okay, this happens, then this happens, then that happens, and that happens, then this and that, and this and that. I was like, you know what? Despite the ridiculously short film time that this movie has, despite the ridiculously short length that this movie has, they do a damn good job with the pacing. You know, nothing feels rushed. Everything feels timed right. Even though we're not even that far into the movie, we're technically not even halfway in the movie. 45 minutes in, Mystique dies. Jean is off with more blood on her hands, more guilt on her hands. And they have a funeral for Raven, for Mystique. And, you know, Beast hates Charles now for letting this happen, and that he wants Charles to admit he was wrong, that trying to protect Jean for many years just made things a whole lot worse. And then, while drama tears everything apart at the X Mansion, Magneto finally comes into the story. We're about 50 minutes into the movie now, almost at the halfway point, and Jean finds Magneto looking after a bunch of mutants, refugee mutants apparently. Like, I guess this is supposed to be the future brotherhood of evil mutants or something. And which is confusing because I thought in X-Men Apocalypse they were all good friends now, or at least they were on relatively peaceful terms. So how does this all work out? But whatever. Magneto is surprised. Eric is surprised to see Jean come here to him, and he wants to help her, but not if she won't spill everything to him. And she knows, like, even though Magneto has always claimed to want the best for mutants, has always tried to do the best he can for mutants, whenever things go that much awry, he goes fucking ballistic. She knows that if she tells him that she killed Raven, he will fucking kill her, because he and Raven were that close over the many, many years. And, which, by the way, Charles reflects briefly as to how he met Raven when she was just a child, and she took the form of his mother to try to steal food. That was touching. That was touching to see. But whatever. Jean ultimately attracts the attention of a military group who are hunting her down. Fuck. I forgot to mention, back when she was fighting the X-Men, she also fought back against a group of police officers who I think she killed, or she killed some, others survived. But anyway, these military soldiers come after her, suspecting Magneto may be housing her, and she ultimately reveals herself, uses her Phoenix powers to tear shit up, and Magneto actually helps the military get away. In a sense, I guess. I mean, he and Jean are literally fighting over control over this helicopter, over this military helicopter, and he literally tells the soldiers to get on this helicopter, that he's trying to take control away from Jean, and I'm like, dude, you should be telling them to run the hell away, to run the fuck away. Why would you want them to get on this helicopter that's clearly not safe to be on anymore? But, of course, all the soldiers get on the helicopter, and Magneto does take control away just enough so the helicopter can fly away. Somehow. I imagine a lot of people are already tearing that scene apart. They'll be like, what the fuck? How the fuck is that sensible at all? How the fuck does that nonsense make any sense? So, I think Magneto is pissed at this point. You know, Jean's like, you said you could help me. Well, clearly you have shit I cannot deal with, so just go. And Jean moves away, and Magneto is suddenly reached out to by Beast, who reveals that Raven's been killed by Jean, and And Magneto says right there, after shedding a couple manly tears, saying, when I find her, I will kill her. And Hank's like, I know, because that's how far his own hate has consumed him. He doesn't care about Jean's shit anymore. He just wants her dead, just like Magneto does, just like the other mutants do, who I assume are other characters from the comics, or just characters that Fox made up. I don't know. So, meanwhile, Jean is being approached by and comforted by the DRB, who reveal that her power is a special kind of force that has traveled across the universe, destroying entire planets and destroying anything that touches. But it also has the potential to create new life, create new wonders and such. And Jean, of course, is buying into this shit. And, you know, even though X-Men The Last Stand had this infamous personality disorder thing with Jean Grey, and they said they were going to adapt the famous comic more properly in this one, which they didn't, and even the critics called out on their bullshit. The critics have been saying in the past few days, they've been saying, this is a poor adaptation of the original comic storyline. But, on the other hand, in regards to the comics, there's this whole section of the story where Jean is brainwashed by a group called the Hellfire Club, who convince her that she's the modern incarnation of a medieval villainess or something called the Grey Lady, something like that. So I guess to some degree they adapted that loosely in this movie with the DRB, but yeah, it probably would have been better if they tried to fit it in the Hellfire Club and all that somehow. But whatever, the whole personality disorder thing I mentioned a minute ago, they clearly played with that here. Even before the Phoenix Force went inside Jean, Jean clearly had some personality shit going on in her head. They clearly kept that in somehow, worked around that somehow, because they just couldn't resist the idea of that. Despite what everybody's been saying for years, that was so fucking bad about The Last Stand and all. And don't forget about the famous way she died in X-Men 2. So she's on the DRB side now, and they're taking residence in some private apartments in New York. And ultimately, you know, the X-Men and Magneto's Brotherhood, they both track down Jean to the apartments. Magneto puts on his famous helmet, but he doesn't put on his famous cape and suit and whatnot. Charles, you know, confronts Magneto with the words, "Hello, old friend," and then Magneto turns around and, like, he instantly goes, "Don't give me any speech bullshit, Charles. We're here to do a job and we're gonna do it." And, you know, they do share some words. There's no getting around that, because, hey, it's Professor X and Magneto. There's always got to be some words shared, especially after these fairly long periods of time that they have not spoken or seen each other since. It all ends, the fighting, the intense action all begins with Magneto's words, "The girl dies." And then the X-Men and the Brotherhood fights while Magneto tries to get closer to the apartments, levitating forward, and Vux is telling Jean to get ready for fighting, and eventually Magneto breaks in, and Jean, with her Phoenix powers, is all, "You're here to kill me?" "Yes." And Magneto tries to fight against her, but as the Phoenix, Jean easily overpowers him. She starts crushing his head with his own helmets, and then breaks the helmet apart, and then almost kills him right on the spot, but I guess Quicksilver shows up. Oh wait, Quicksilver just stopped showing up. We're about an hour 10-ish into the movie now, and I suddenly realized, oh wait, what the hell happened to Quicksilver? I guess he got injured. He got very injured in the fight against Jean in the town. Jean did outwit his super speed at one moment and was able to strike back at him, but I don't think they made it clear that alone had severely hurt him. Oh, and of course, Quicksilver never reveals that Magneto was his father. Whoever thought? I kind of hoped they would finally touch in on that. Whoever thought that they were finally going to show that here? Nope, they didn't even try. And they probably thought they were going to finally do so in a future movie, even though this movie pretty much had every reason to be the last James McAvoy movie, X-Men movie in this franchise. Nope, they didn't even try. Oh well. So, at these apartments, I think, let's see here. Charles does get into the apartments, eventually get into the apartments to confront Jean, telling Jean, look, I'm sorry about everything, but you have to come back to us now, or things will get a lot worse, exponentially worse. But Jean just mocks him and says, if you're willing to be this personal with me, then walk to me. Charles is just sitting there saying, you know I can't. But with her Phoenix powers, he does. And this was crazy. And I like James McAvoy's movement acting with this, where he has to act like he's possessed, where the Phoenix is forcing him to move up the stairs and towards her. You know, he's moving. His feet are barely dragging across the floor as he's moving and walking. No! No! Jean, please! Please! But she brings him to her, and she's about to kill him on the spot, but then they have a sort of metaphysical duel or something between their minds where Jean finally fully comprehends what Charles was trying to do all these years in protecting her, and that he's terribly, terribly sorry for everything. She needs to come back. She starts crying, and her eyes are not so phoenixy anymore, let alone the veins across her body glowing and whatever. Charles smiles, saying, I knew you were still in there. I knew there was some part of you still in there. And Fuchs just looks at her sternly, saying, You know this is not your destiny. I don't want this destiny. I never asked for this. I never wanted this power. And then Fuchs actually turns sort of kindly in a sense, saying, then let me take it away from you. Let me take it all. So then Jean gives in, they hug each other, and Fuchs sucks the Phoenix Force out of her, and then Charles soon realizes, holy shit, she's going to get killed. She demands Fuchs stop, and then Cyclops comes in, Scott comes in, and shoots at Fuchs before Fuchs can finish off Jean. And he barely saves Jean and Charles' life while Fuchs flees with her newfound Phoenix powers. So now she has the Phoenix powers, but she's not going to use them yet. And she gathers her DRB Brotherhood and prepares to finish off Jean, to chase after Jean after all these soldiers kidnap the X-Men and the Mutants Brotherhood, and prepare to transfer them all to prison, I guess. I guess the X-Men are total enemies now again. This isn't exactly made clear even by or maybe it is by the end of the movie that they're heroes again, I don't know. So on the train, before we get to the big climax here, the real climax of this movie, we're about an hour and 25 minutes in, and Charles does admit to everybody, I was wrong. I thought I was doing right for so many years, but I was wrong. But now, more than ever, we have to work together, this and that, and I know that's what Raven would have wanted. Raven would not have wanted you to kill Jean. She would have wanted Jean to live, and this makes Beast all emotional, and this makes Magneto emotional too, without expressing so much. And then the train is attacked by the aliens, who at this point, have more than enough reason to show themselves in their natural form, but they don't, because production costs, I guess. Because it's cheaper to show these aliens in human form, just like in every TV show you've seen for decades now. And, the aliens, the DRB, get on the train, the X-Men are freed at the last possible second. The X-Men and the Mutant Brotherhood are released at the last possible second to defend the remaining soldiers, even though most of them are killed by now. And the DRB say, "We just want the girl. Stand aside." "Never," says Beast, because he's all good now. He's not hateful to Jean anymore, and they fight the aliens, they fend them off, but then Vooks arrives, and she easily bitch slaps all the X-Men aside, including Charles, and she almost absorbs Jean into herself, but Jean fights back after having the mental conversation with Charles, because Jean, in her child form, goes into Charles's head, saying, "It's much more peaceful in your mind than it is in mine, isn't it?" And, he apologizes to her one last time, saying, "I did what I did to protect you." Which is ironic, because you didn't even have the Phoenix Force before all this, so I've been protecting you from yourself, and I guess you had a personality disorder before something, I don't know. Okay, I can see a lot of people making arguments about this, about complaining about this quite a bit, but what are you gonna do? So Jean frees herself, and with the remaining Phoenix power she has left, she fights back. The train gets blown off, and it crashes into this nearby street, and there's all this wreckage and stuff, and Vooks shows up again. She slaps aside the X-Men again, and then she faces the Phoenix. Jean. She tries to absorb Jean one last time, but then she realizes too late, "Oh God, I'm the one getting fucked now. Fuck me." As Jean says, "You wanted this power, and you're going to have it from me," or something like that. She ultimately destroys Vooks, being the last of the DRB aliens who are killed off. And then Jean just suddenly explodes, or at least flies off into the night, flies off into space. And everybody assumes, I guess they assume she's dead, or just that she's gone, and then we have our resolution. We are about an hour 40 minutes in now. We had this fairly long, mostly satisfying climax. I mean, the final act to me, despite the solid pacing that the first two acts had, the final act is where I think things really fell apart, because I'm not even sure if I can recollect this right, even though I just saw it earlier in the day. Again, why couldn't the aliens have been shown in their natural form for this final big fight with the X-Men and the mutants? And, I'm sure there's plenty of other things they could have done with the final act that they couldn't do because of production costs and pacing and other reasons, whatever, but anyway, we have our resolution, and Charles is no longer the head of the X Academy, which technically he wasn't as far... This sort of ties in with the whole post-credits scene... Not post-credits. The ending scene of Days of Future Past, where we saw Logan traveling the X Academy, seeing all the X-Men living happy lives that they didn't even know they had won because of what happened before. And I don't think Charles... I can't remember if Charles was the head of X Academy or not, but we clearly saw Jean Grey came back to life. K. Jensen, if I'm saying that right, had played as her in that one cameo scene. And Scott Summers was alive again, who had been killed off in X-Men Last Stand, played by James Marsden. And, it is confusing how that ties in here exactly. I mean, they tried to pull off that Jean Grey was dead, but she clearly wasn't, and I'll get to that in a sec. But anyway, the X Academy has now been renamed the Jean Grey Academy for Mutants. And I forgot to mention there was this touching scene earlier with the children. The children were terrified of Jean. They asked, "Is it true Jean killed Raven?" And Scott tries to comfort them, saying, "It was an accident. She had no control. She didn't know what she was doing." But you know, the kids are not buying this bullshit, and they're really, really scared. Yeah, and so the X-Men are being celebrated by the president again as heroes and all. And Charles is now living on his own, doing whatever the hell he wants with the money he still has. The private money he still has, I guess. I forgot to, and it was funny, I forgot to mention earlier that Charles was at this special event with the president, you know, who were glorifying the X-Men and honoring him, and when he realized there was trouble with Jean and the X-Men back at home, he said, "I'm sorry, I gotta go, thank you very much." But he's not doing that anymore here, he's just on his own, and then Magneto approaches him with a chessboard saying, "You offered me a home in the past, now I'm offering you one. Come live with me." And Charles is hesitant, but then Magneto insists on them playing a chess game with two-fisted hands, you know, one holding each a black and a white piece, and he's like, "Come on, Charles, one game." Charles chooses the left hand, and it's the white piece, so that means he has the first move, and then they start playing their game, and as they start playing their game, the camera pans up to the sky, and we see this little fire bird flying in the distance, reminding us that Jean Grey is still there, and she ends the movie with some ending narration saying, I think she had this narration beforehand, before we saw the Charles Magneto scene, saying, "I have evolved to my limits now." But how everyone will evolve is a whole different story. And I don't remember it. I don't remember it very well right now. And again, we see the Phoenix bird far, far up and away in the sky, flying, reminding us that Jean Grey is still there somewhere, and she will return someday. And the movie ends, and there's no post-credits scene, and that's the end of X-Men Dark Phoenix. That's the end of the X-Men movies themselves, with the exception of New Mutants, but we'll see how that turns out. And that was X-Men Dark Phoenix, and I really liked it. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly where I would rank this movie. I would say either in a B range at the lowest, or even in a B+ range at the highest. I thought there were a lot of good ideas that were done here, that were used here, and were executed very well for what this movie was trying to be, despite apparently how sloppily of a mess the background production had been. I don't know all the details, I'm sure it's sketchy as hell, but you know, despite all those problems, I felt that there were a lot of good ideas suggested, and a lot of good ideas executed, at least as far as the first two acts were concerned. The final act is where it really fell apart for me. It felt like they were not exploring, they had not explored everything well enough that they could have done in the first two acts, that they were closing up here in the final act, or that they could have even extended on in the final act itself if this movie had tried to be longer, and it didn't. Again, this movie was only an hour 45 minutes, and I'm sure a lot of people are relieved that it wasn't even 2 hours, because shorter is better, less is more, or some stuff like that. But again, there were a lot of good ideas that were done well here. I like how the X-Men wear their classic suits, their classic blue and yellow suits, which I think Raven was complaining about, like, why are we wearing these suits, these ridiculous suits that make us look like, that make us look too full of ourselves, too arrogant or something. I don't know. It felt like I was for the most part, especially when it came to the first two acts, it felt like I was watching a comic book movie with these iconic suits, these iconic X-Men suits and X-Men logos and stuff. Oh, and apparently Raven thinks the X, she personally considers that the X stands for Charles' name, for Xavier, not for the mutants, not for the X-Men. Oh, so many nitpicks that are just coming at the top of my head, and so many more that I cannot put here at the end of this vlog. But man, I saw this criticism from critics saying that the actors were too tired at this point to play these characters. Apparently, people considered Jennifer Lawrence and Michael Fassbender's performances to be the worst of all these actors, which I don't think so. I thought they were trying their best for what it was worth, for what they got to work with. This movie apparently had a lot of reshoots, and yeah, it kind of shows. And apparently people do consider James McAvoy and Sophie Turner to be the best performances in comparison. And yeah, Sophie Turner, I don't know much about her. Apparently she's an English actress playing all these American characters and so on, and I barely know anything about her to judge her as good of an actress as she can be, or has been, or as good of a role model and so forth. I don't know. Personally, for me, she always seemed a bit sketchy these past few years that she's become fairly popular. At least to me, that's how it is with her. But yeah, I really did like her performance. I felt like she was trying to give it her all, and she did a solid job most of all. James McAvoy, yeah, he was really good and all. I felt like, considering how short this movie was, there was not enough. There was not even, in some ways, there was not even close to enough for these actors to work with these characters, some of which they have been playing for several years now. Had they had more to work with, had the director, had the producers known what they were doing, what they were trying to do with this movie behind the scenes, which I'm sure they weren't in comparison to Warner Brothers and others at this point, but James McAvoy is always a pleasure to watch as Charles, and it's a shame that this seems to officially be the final time he will play this character, and who knows what the hell Disney is going to do. Like, we can't guarantee that they're going to do it better, because obviously they're going to try to go their own way as much as possible, and considering how they're going to bring the X-Men in this late into the MCU, I'm really concerned how they're going to fit everything in there, let alone with the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer and so forth. Man, I mean, I don't want to go on much more. I'm going to end the video and end the vlog any second now. I am really glad I saw this. It was definitely worth a sitting. It probably is worth another sitting or two, but considering my own time schedule and all, it's very unlikely I'll see this even one more time with anybody. And if the Bizarro Critic hasn't seen it yet, you know, he's probably not going to like it, but I urge him to see it at least once, and judge for yourself, BC, whether there is absolutely nothing or little to nothing that you can find good about this movie, especially in comparison to past X-Men movies, because I'm pretty sure the Bizarro Critic is one of countless who hate X-Men Origins Wolverine. It doesn't look that bad to me. It actually looks pretty good. I'm just saying. I'm glad this movie turned out really good. I am interested as to how New Mutants is going to turn out, especially since that is the official last film of this franchise. And it's probably not going to go... This franchise is probably not going to go out on much of a higher note, especially comparing how low of a note this turned out to be. Yeah, and it's interesting enough that New Mutants is going to be released on the 20th anniversary of the original X-Men film, which seems like the perfect time to look over these movies in vlogs of the Bizarro Critic, which I'll get to him on that as soon as possible. And yeah, for better or worse, the X-Men franchise is officially at an end, whether with this movie or New Mutants or however you want to see it. And even though I am very concerned with how the X-Men is going to turn out, along with all the other characters that Disney is finally going to use in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, no matter how worse certain things may be here and there, maybe it will turn out all for the better in the end, especially compared with the X-Men franchise overall that began in 2000 and is ending next year in 2020. For better or for worse, I am both anxious and excitingly anticipating what will come in the near future. And that was my X-Men Dark Phoenix vlog. Thank you for joining me, and there's plenty more comic news stuff, and we're working on some Snark Spy stuff too, and the Fiend Fellow might show up eventually sometime this summer, but we'll see how his availability works out. And there's also a special announcement coming very soon after the release of this video about a certain Marvel-thon that has not been released, has not finished releasing yet. Yeah, look forward to that. And thank you so much again for staying with me for this long and for the bizarre epicness that X-Men Dark Phoenix turned out to be. I am the Spirit Man, the embracer of human good and analyst of fiction, saying good night and good morning to all who are looking forward to a brand new day. Thanks, everybody. Take care.